The first thing I saw when I came back to life was page 6, and it was ugly. Not dramatic ugly, not stained with blood or circled in red by some cruel examiner, just genuinely, embarrassingly ugly. Crooked pencil lines, rush numbers, a smudged coffee ring for my mother's mug, and a photograph taped slightly too far to the left showing my first bridge prototype split clean down the middle under 18.4 kilograms of load. The caption beneath it was written in my own cramped handwriting. Prototype A failed at center joint, compression member buckled, diagonal bracing too shallow, redesign required. In my first life, that page had humiliated me before anyone else even saw it. I had spent 2 weeks building a clean final model for the Halcyon Engineering Design Scholarship, but page 6 showed the truth behind it. My first attempt failed. It cracked. It sagged. It died in front of my little brother while he was holding the timer. I hated the page because it made me look imperfect. Mrs. Verity Calloway knew that. She had looked at page 6 the morning of submission, smiled her calm, polished, head of faculty smile, and said, "Tear it out, Mira. The judges don't need to see your failure." In my first life, I tore it out. My logbook jumped from page 5 to page 7 like nothing important had happened in between. The judges noticed. My final bridge design looked suspiciously advanced without the failed test that justified the redesign. Calloway's favorite, her daughter Livia, submitted a polished model with the same corrected bracing as mine and won because her mother had taught her how to look complete without ever breaking anything. I lost the scholarship, lost the design placement, lost Halcyon, and years later died in the collapse of a half-renovated community hall where a missing inspection page had been quietly removed from the safety file. My last thought under falling plaster was not poetic. It was furious and practical. Never tear out the failure. Then I opened my eyes, and page 6 was still in my hand, still ugly, still whole, still the only page that proved I had actually built the bridge myself. The Halcyon Engineering Design Scholarship was not supposed to reward perfection. That was the first lie. The official criteria said the judges valued process, testing, iteration, honesty, and justified improvement. Every student received a numbered design logbook with sealed page corners, a materials kit, a load testing appointment, and 4 weeks to design a lightweight bridge from balsa wood, thread, glue, and 2 metal pins. The final bridge would be tested publicly in the Old Technology Theater, suspended between 2 steel blocks while weights were added to the center platform until the structure failed. The winner received full Year 12 tuition, a summer place at the Lorimer Structural Design Lab, a university mentor, and a recommendation letter strong enough to open doors that usually remained locked to girls like me. My mother read the scholarship page on her phone after her cleaning shift and whispered, "Full tuition?" as if the words might vanish if spoken too loudly. My father, who repaired apartment lifts until a shoulder injury made climbing ladders dangerous, stared at the cracked kitchen tiles and said, "You can win that." Not can you. Not maybe. You can. My little brother Nico immediately asked if the winning bridge could hold him. I told him only if he became 18 kilograms of sand. He said he could try. My name was Mira Soline, and I learned engineering from buildings that complained. Our apartment block groaned in summer when the concrete expanded. The stair rail shook at the 3rd landing because one bracket was loose. The laundry window whistled in storms because the frame had pulled away from the wall. My father heard those things the way musicians hear wrong notes. Before his shoulder gave out, he took me on weekend jobs when babysitting fell through, and I watched him listen to lifts, doors, pipes, vents, and broken locks. "Nothing fails suddenly," he used to say. "It announces itself." People just prefer the announcement to be quieter than the repair bill. I loved that. I loved the idea that structures had stories if you knew where to put your ear. At Halcyon, though, students treated design like presentation. Their models arrived in foam cases. Their sketches looked like architectural posters. Their parents used words like portfolio ready. I brought my bridge in an old shoebox padded with tea towels, and my logbook smelled faintly of our kitchen because I had done most of the work beside the sink while my mother packed leftovers and my father iced his shoulder. Mrs. Verity Calloway ran the design and applied engineering faculty like a gallery curator pretending to be a scientist. She had a smooth blonde bob, small pearl earrings, pale manicured hands, and a smile so controlled it seemed measured with a ruler. She spoke softly and never hurried, which made students hurry to please her. Her classroom walls displayed student projects under perfect lighting: polished timber stools, laser-cut towers, model houses, folded metal sculptures, architectural drawings with shadows so elegant nobody asked whether the designs could survive rain. She adored finish. That was her word. A project needed finish. A student needed finish. A presentation needed finish. What she meant was that evidence of struggle should be sanded away before anyone important arrived. Her daughter, Livia Calloway, was the natural product of that philosophy. Flawless hair, clean white sleeves, perfect drawings, perfect speech, perfect panic hidden under perfect posture. Livia was talented, but she had been taught to avoid the part of design where things break. Her bridge looked beautiful from the first week. Too beautiful. The joints were tight, the bracing symmetrical, the deck smooth. But it was also wrong in the way pretty student bridges are wrong when nobody has made them fail yet. The load path looked elegant until weight found the weakest joint. My first prototype failed on a Thursday evening at our dining table. I remember the sound more than the sight. A sharp tick, then a slow tearing crunch as the center joint buckled and the left truss folded inward. Nico yelled, "Bridge death," with far too much enthusiasm. My father, who had been pretending not to hover, leaned over the wreckage and said, "Good." I stared at him. "Good. It told you where it hurts." I wanted to cry. I had spent 12 hours on that bridge, cutting balsa strips with a craft knife until my fingertips went numb, pinning the frame with sewing needles, waiting for glue to dry between homework and dinner. The failure felt personal, like the bridge had betrayed my care. My father tapped the broken center joint with a pencil. Compression member buckled. Diagonal too shallow. You made a pretty triangle, not a working one. Nico repeated "pretty triangle" in a voice that made me threaten to glue his mouth shut. My mother put tea beside me and said, "Write it down before you start being dramatic." So I wrote it down. Page 6 became the failure page. Photo, load number, sketch of the buckled member, reason for failure, redesign plan. I deepened the diagonal bracing, changed the center gusset, staggered the joints, added a tension thread pattern underneath, and cut weight from the deck, where it did nothing. Prototype B held 39.2 kilograms before twisting at the right support. The final bridge held more. Page 6 was not a stain. It was the hinge between guessing and knowing. I did not understand that in my first life until after I had torn it out. The morning of submission in the first life, I arrived early, carrying my bridge in the shoebox and my logbook pressed against my chest. The technology theater smelled like sawdust, varnish, raincoats, and expensive coffee from the parents' table. Students placed their bridges on numbered stands along the side wall. Judges' clipboards waited at the front. Each logbook had to be submitted before testing, sealed in a clear sleeve with the student's candidate number. I was candidate 18. Livia was candidate 04. Mrs. Calloway moved through the room with that smooth smile, praising neat labels, straight edges, clean portfolios. When she reached my table, she looked at my bridge first. Not long. Just enough. Then she opened my logbook. Page 1, problem statement. Page 2, constraints. Page 3, early sketches. Page 4, material tests. Page 5, prototype A plan. Page 6, failure. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes sharpened. She read the caption. She looked at the photo. She looked at the redesigned bracing on my final bridge. Then she said, "Oh, Mira. That, did more damage than a criticism would have." It made me feel like something had spilled. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "This page is very raw." I glanced at the failed bridge photo. "It shows the first test." "Yes." "Too much." She turned the logbook slightly, so only I could see page 6. "The judges are not looking for collapse. They are looking for confidence. The criteria says testing and iteration." "Of course, but you need to curate your process." Her thumb rested near the page corner. "Tear it out." I thought I had misheard. "Tear out page 6? "Yes. But the pages are numbered." Students remove messy pages all the time. It happens during drafting. The logbook is sealed. I am telling you, as the faculty supervisor, that this page weakens you. Her smile warmed, which somehow made the room colder. You have done something impressive with the final model. Don't let an ugly failure distract from it. I hesitated, and she lowered her voice. Livia's project is extremely refined. The judges will compare presentation as well as performance. You cannot afford to look uncontrolled. When fear did not move me quickly enough, she touched the places she knew would bruise. My scholarship renewal was still pending. My material bursary had covered the balsa kit after 3 emails from my mother. My father had been allowed to repair 2 workshop stools for a small cash payment when the school refused to hire an external contractor, and that arrangement was informal. Nico was on the waitlist for the Junior STEM holiday program Mrs. Calloway supervised. I want you to do well, she said. But doing well here means understanding what to show and what to leave out. Then came the sentence. Tear it out, Mira. The judges don't need to see your failure. I looked down at the page. The failed bridge. The 18.4. My father's note in the margin. Good failure. Useful. My stomach twisted. I thought of Livia's perfect logbook. I thought of judges seeing my ugly page and deciding I was messy, poor, unpolished, not made for laboratories with glass walls. So I tore it out. The sound was small, almost polite. Paper separating from glue. A future separating from proof. Everything after that looked fine until it mattered. My bridge performed beautifully, holding 46 kilograms before the right top chord split. People clapped. Even Mrs. Calloway raised her eyebrows as if surprised by my competence. But during logbook review, Professor Sato, the external structural engineer, asked, "Can you explain the transition from your initial shallow diagonal sketch to the deeper X-bracing in the final model?" I opened my mouth. Page 6 was gone. I could explain verbally, but the submitted record jumped. Page 5 showed the first prototype plan. Page 7 showed the redesign, clean and confident, with no failure data between. "Where is the initial load test?" he asked. I removed a messy page. Was there a test? Yes. What load? 18.4 kilograms. He frowned. Why is it not documented? Because I obeyed the woman smiling beside you, I wanted to say. Instead, I said, I thought it made the logbook look unpolished. His face changed with disappointment. Not anger. Worse. In engineering, undocumented failure is not polish. It is a missing safety record. Livia's bridge held 38 kilograms, less than mine, but her logbook appeared complete. Her final bracing suspiciously matched my redesign pattern, though without the failed test that would have explained why. Mrs. Calloway praised her elegant development. The judges debated. Performance versus presentation. Strength versus documentation. Livia won by 2 points. At the ceremony, Mrs. Calloway's smile shone like varnish under the stage lights. Mine had sawdust under it. The first life did not end that day. It just began bending away from the path I needed. Without the scholarship, Halcyon became too expensive. My mother took extra cleaning jobs in office buildings with marble lobbies and security guards who called her dear. My father sold his old Lyft diagnostic tablet, then most of his tools, then stopped answering calls from former clients because shame is a structure too, and has had no bracing left. Nico did not get into the junior STEM program. Livia went to Lorimer Structural Design Lab, won a National Young Designer Award, and later gave interviews about learning from failure, a phrase that made me taste blood because I knew exactly whose failure had been removed to make her look like she understood it. I finished school elsewhere, studied drafting part-time, and worked for a small construction documentation firm where my job was to organize files nobody important wanted to read until something went wrong. I learned the adult version of page 6, inspection notes, defect reports, load warnings, moisture logs, cracked beam photos, emails with phrases like monitor when the engineer meant close this area now. Buildings do not fall because nobody sees the crack. They fall because someone decides the crack is inconvenient to document. The community hall collapse happened when I was 29. It was not dramatic until it was fatal. The hall had been built in the 1960s, renovated badly in the 1990s, patched repeatedly, and loved by everyone who used it. Dance classes, pensioner lunches, local elections, after-school tutoring, storm shelter registration. Our firm had been contracted to digitize renovation records before a grant application. I found a missing inspection page in the file sequence, page 6 of the roof truss report, absent between moisture readings and repair recommendations. I remember laughing bitterly when I saw the gap. Page 6 again. The site manager said old files were always messy. I requested the original box from storage. Before it arrived, heavy rain hit the suburb. Water entered through a long-ignored roof seam. The ceiling sagged during a community meeting. I was there with document boxes near the side wall when someone shouted. A cracking sound moved above us like a giant knuckle breaking. I pushed a child toward the exit. The roof section came down. Timber, plaster, rain, dust. I remember lying pinned beneath a beam, hearing water drip onto paper, seeing pages slide across the floor. One sheet stuck near my hand, torn at the edge, numbered 6. My last thought was not of death. It was of the bridge prototype on our dining table and my father saying, "It told you where it hurts." Then I woke in the technology theater, holding the page I had once removed. This time, I did not let shame touch page 6 before I acted. I placed it flat on the table, took out my phone, and photographed the spread, page 5, page 6, page 7, with the numbered corners visible. I photographed the failed prototype, the load number, the redesign sketch, my father's note, and the final bridge beside it, so the connection was impossible to pretend away later. Then I emailed the images to myself, my mother, my father, and the external submission address printed on the scholarship guidelines. Subject: Candidate 18 Design Logbook Pre-Submission Record. I did not write a speech. I wrote, "Full logbook photographed before submission for record integrity." My hands were shaking, but the email sent. Across the theater, Livia arranged her bridge on stand 04, perfect as a pastry, while Mrs. Calloway moved toward me with her polished smile already prepared. "Mira," she said, opening my logbook without asking. "Same perfume, same pearls, same soft voice. Let me check your presentation sequence." She reached page 6 and paused. The smile stayed. The room seemed to lean closer. "Oh, Mira." In another life, that sound made me feel small. In this one, I heard it for what it was, a tool. "Yes," I asked. "This page is very raw." It is the first load failure. It interrupts the finish of the portfolio. It explains the redesign. Her thumb moved toward the corner. "Tear it out." She said it quietly, almost kindly, as if she were saving me from spinach in my teeth instead of asking me to remove the only proof that my final bridge had a history. "No," I said. The word came out too fast and small, but it came out. Her eyes lifted. "Excuse me?"
No.
I'm turning in page 6. Her smile did not vanish. Not yet. It adapted. "Mira, I am advising you as the faculty supervisor." "I understand. The judges do not need to see your failure. The criteria says they do." "You are being literal." "It is an engineering logbook. Do not be difficult." "I'm not. I'm submitting the full record." Her hand rested lightly on the page. Not enough to tear, enough to remind me she could. Think carefully. Presentation matters. Livia's work is highly refined. Then her logbook should show how she refined it. That was the first crack in the air between us. Her pupils tightened. "Your family has received a great deal of support from this school." There it was. Your material bursary. Your father's workshop arrangement. Your brother's STEM application. Gratitude matters. My throat went dry. Rebirth does not make threats painless. It only makes them familiar. Does gratitude require tearing out page 6? I asked. Her smile thinned. It requires maturity. Then I'll maturely submit the full logbook. I raised my hand before she could answer. Not high. Just enough. Mr. Hahn, the external engineering judge's assistant, looked over from the submission desk. Candidate 18? I need my logbook sealed for submission with all pages intact. Mrs. Calloway's hand left page 6. That was the moment I knew the page had won its first battle. Mr. Han came over with a clear sleeve and a seal strip. All pages intact, he repeated. Yes, I said. Page 6 included. He looked at the open spread, then at Mrs. Calloway. Any issue? She smiled. Only advising presentation polish. The rules require complete process records, he said. Failed tests are part of process. Beautiful man. Beautiful boring sentence. He slid the logbook into the clear sleeve, sealed it, wrote Candidate 18 across the strip, and annealed the corner. Page 6 disappeared into plastic, not removed, but protected. Mrs. Calloway's smile held, but something behind it shifted. A hairline fracture. I saw it. The bridge testing began at 10. Students sat in rows while parents and donors occupied the back, sipping coffee and pretending sawdust was charming. Professor Sato stood beside the steel test rig, gray hair tied back, sleeves rolled to the elbow, the calmest person in the room. Each bridge would be weighed, measured, visually inspected, then loaded until failure. The load-to-weight ratio counted. So did build quality, documentation, and explanation. Livia presented fourth. Her bridge was beautiful. Pale balsa, symmetrical side trusses, neat deck, white thread tensioning underneath. It held 38.6 kilograms before the center deck cracked and the left diagonal popped free. Respectable. She smiled through the applause, though I saw her glance at her mother. Mrs. Calloway nodded once. A rehearsed transfer of confidence. During questions, Professor Sato asked, "What failure in testing led you to choose deeper diagonal bracing here?" Livia's smile faltered. I anticipated the need for better force distribution. Did a prototype fail? Not significantly. What load did your earlier version hold? I focused on final optimization rather than destructive testing. Professor Sato wrote something down. Mrs. Calloway's smile brightened too much. I presented 18th. My bridge weighed slightly more than Livia's, but not by much. I placed it on the rig with hands that wanted to tremble and did not get permission. Professor Sato inspected the joints, lifted the deck slightly, checked the tension thread, and nodded. Candidate 18. Begin load. The first weights were easy. 10 kilograms. 15. 18.4. My chest tightened as the number from page 6 returned, but the bridge held. Nico, seated beside my mother, whispered loudly, "Beat the dead one," and my mother elbowed him. 25. 30. 38.6. Livia's number. My bridge held. The room noticed. 40. 42. 44. At 46.3, the right top cord split with a sharp crack, and the bridge twisted down, not collapsing all at once, but surrendering in a controlled way that made Professor Sato step closer with interest. Applause came. Real applause, not pity. I let myself breathe. Then came questions. Professor Sato opened my logbook to page 6. Not page 1. Not the final beauty shots. Page 6. Ugly, smudged, taped alive. Walk us through this failure, he said. My fear changed shape. It became readiness. Prototype A failed at 18.4 kilograms because the center compression member buckled. The diagonal bracing angle was too shallow, so the force concentrated at the center joint instead of distributing through the side trusses. I redesigned the bracing into a deeper X pattern, staggered the joints to avoid a single failure line, and added underside tension thread to reduce deck twist. I pointed to the final bridge remains. The final failure occurred at the right top cord instead of the center joint, so the redesign addressed the original weakness, but introduced a new limit at the support transition. Professor Sato looked at me over his glasses. Good. You did not hide the first failure. No, why? I looked briefly at Mrs. Calloway. Her smile was still there, fixed too hard. Because if I hide where it failed, the redesign looks like luck. Professor Sato nodded once. And in engineering? Luck is not documentation. He almost smiled. Correct. The second pattern interruption came during portfolio comparison. The judges spread the top candidates' logbooks on the side table while students waited. That was normal. What was not normal was Professor Sato calling Livia and me back together. Mrs. Calloway moved as if to accompany her daughter, but Mr. Han politely said, "Students only for this question." Livia walked up with her chin lifted. I stood beside her, hands clasped. Professor Sato placed my page 6 photograph beside Livia's final bridge sketch. Both final designs use a distinctive staggered center gusset and underside thread pattern, he said. Candidate 18 documents the change after a specific failed load test. Candidate 04, your logbook shows the feature appearing in the final plan without prior test data. Can you explain how you arrived at it? Livia looked at the sketch, then at her mother, then at the table. It was a refinement. Based on what? General structural principles. Which principle led you to stagger the center gusset rather than reinforce it symmetrically? Her mouth opened. Nothing came. The room was too quiet. Mrs. Calloway's smile remained, but the left corner twitched. I almost felt sorry for Livia then. Almost. She had built something, or at least helped build it. She had talent. But talent without the memory of failure becomes decorative under pressure. I wanted to reduce stress concentration, she said finally. Not wrong. Too broad. Professor Sato asked, where did you observe the stress concentration? Silence. In the model. Which model? The final model. You observed the need before the final model existed? Her face reddened. The question was not cruel. That made it worse. It was simply structural. The answer needed a failed test. She did not have one. Page 6 sat between us like a witness. Mrs. Calloway stepped forward then, smile wider than ever. Professor, perhaps I can clarify the teaching sequence. Several students explored center reinforcement after a group discussion. Was Candidate 18's failed prototype A discussed with the group? He asked. Her smile froze. Not formally. Informally. Students observe each other's work in the studio. Did Candidate 04 observe Candidate 18's failed test? Livia whispered. I saw the photo. Everyone turned. Mrs. Calloway's head snapped slightly toward her daughter. Livia, she said, still smiling, voice almost pleasant. I saw the photo on Mum's desk, Livia said, quieter now, as if the truth had pulled one thread and found the whole seam loose. She said Mira had a good idea, but messy documentation. The smile cracked. Not shattered. Cracked. The right side of Mrs. Calloway's mouth stayed lifted while the left failed to follow, exposing, for one visible second, the panic beneath the varnish. Her eyes flicked to the judges, to my sealed logbook, to page 6, to her daughter, and back again. She tried to repair the smile. It came back crooked. Professor Sato closed my logbook carefully. We will pause portfolio review. That sentence changed the theater more than a shout would have. Students whispered. Parents leaned forward. Mr. Han collected both logbooks and placed them in separate evidence sleeves. Mrs. Calloway said, this is unnecessary. Student inspiration often overlaps. Professor Sato looked at her calmly. Failure documentation does not overlap by accident. I loved him for that sentence. Livia looked as if she might cry. I did not comfort her. I also did not enjoy it as much as the first life version of me might have imagined. There is a special sadness in watching someone discover that the path laid for them was built out of stolen pieces and still led into a wall. The review took 3 hours. Students were released to lunch, but nobody left campus. Rumor moved through Halcyon like smoke under doors. Page 6. Torn page. Livia saw the photo. Calloway's smile cracked. Candidate 18's bridge beat hers. Someone started calling my failed prototype the dead bridge, and by afternoon 3-year 9s had drawn a cartoon bridge ghost on the whiteboard outside the workshop. Teenagers are chaotic historians, but they remember the right symbols. My mother found me outside near the rain garden, Nico beside her with sawdust still stuck to his sleeve because he had hugged the shoebox earlier. What happened? She asked. I held up my hands. They were finally shaking. I turned it in. Page 6. Yes. My father, who had come late because his shoulder was bad that morning, arrived behind her just in time to hear. He closed his eyes. Good failure, he said. I started crying then, because in my first life I had torn out the page with his words on it. At 4, The finalists were called back to the theater. The judges sat at the front. Mrs. Calloway sat to the side, no longer standing as faculty host. Her smile was gone now, replaced by a composed expression that looked worse because we all knew what it was covering. Livia sat 2 seats away from her, hands folded, face pale. Professor Sato addressed the room. The scholarship review identified a documentation integrity concern involving Candidate 04 and inappropriate faculty access to Candidate 18's process record. Candidate 18's full logbook, including failed prototype A testing on page 6, was submitted intact and verified before judging. I felt my mother grip my shoulder. The judges had determined that Candidate 18's documentation, testing, redesign rationale, and final bridge performance represent the strongest engineering process in this year's competition. He looked at me. The Halcyon Engineering Design Scholarship is awarded to Mira Solin. For a moment I did not move. In the first life, this was where Livia stood. This was where Mrs. Calloway's smile gleamed. This was where I clapped with hands that had torn out my own proof. Now the room was clapping for me, but the sound seemed to come from far away, as if traveling through rain. Nico shouted, "Page 6-1," and my mother tried to hush him while crying. My father laughed, then winced because his shoulder did not approve of joy. I walked to the front. Professor Sato handed me the certificate and, unexpectedly, my sealed logbook. "Keep this," he said quietly. "Engineers need their failures." I held the plastic sleeve against my chest. Page 6 was visible through it, ugly and perfect. The disciplinary report came later, after adults had time to turn visible wrongdoing into formal paragraphs. Mrs. Calloway had accessed my logbook draft without documented feedback, advised removal of a material failure record, referenced my family's financial and program support inappropriately, and failed to disclose that Livia's final design had incorporated features visible in my unreleased process documentation. Livia was disqualified from prize consideration but not accused of full academic fraud because she admitted seeing the photo but claimed not to understand the source of the redesign guidance. That seemed both true and insufficient. Mrs. Calloway resigned from faculty leadership before the school board finished reviewing previous competitions. Officially, she left to pursue independent design education consulting. Of course, people who polish harm rarely stop working with polish. The school changed the scholarship rules. Logbooks had to be uploaded directly to an external portal, draft access was logged, failed tests could not be removed after testing appointments, faculty relatives could not supervise candidates, and students were explicitly told that failure documentation strengthened, not weakened, design assessment. Boring reforms. Beautiful reforms. Every future page 6 had more armor than mine did. Livia did not speak to me until the end of term. I was in the workshop, cleaning glue from the cutting mats because scholarship winners apparently still had to do chores when she appeared by the door. No ribbon that day. No perfect smile. Just a girl holding a snapped balsa strip in both hands. "I built another bridge," she said. I waited. It failed at 22 kilograms. Her voice was flat, but her fingers worried the broken strip. "Congratulations." She looked startled. "It failed. Then you have data." Her eyes filled, not dramatically, not for sympathy. More like someone had been given a language after years of being praised for silence. "Mum always fixed things before they broke in front of me," she said. "Or after, before anyone saw. That's not design." "I know that now." She swallowed. "I saw your photo on her desk. I knew it was yours. I told myself ideas move around in studios." "Convenient." "Yes." "Good answer." She looked at the cutting mats. "I'm sorry." Not because I lost. Because when Professor Sato asked me where I observed the stress concentration, I realized I didn't know the bridge. I only knew what it was supposed to look like. That sentence mattered. It did not erase anything, but it had weight. "Then build ugly for a while," I said. "And write down where it hurts." She nodded. We did not become friends. But she stayed after school 3 weeks later to test another prototype, and when it split at the deck, she photographed it before touching the pieces. That was something. The scholarship changed my life the way a well-placed brace changes a failing truss. quietly, structurally, everywhere. Tuition cleared. My mother stopped taking Sunday cleaning shifts. My father kept his tools and eventually began teaching repair workshops at the community center, where he made teenagers test their projects until they failed and then made them applaud the break. Nico got into the junior STEM program, hated the first week, loved the second, and became unbearable about load distribution. I went to Lorimer's structural design lab and spent the summer surrounded by people who did not flinch at broken models. The first time a graduate engineer looked at my failed prototype photo and said, "Great, this is the useful part," I nearly cried into a box of balsa strips. At Lorimer, I learned formal language for what my father had always known: failure modes, stress concentrations, buckling, load paths, redundancy, inspection intervals, documentation integrity. I learned that structures do not care about smiles, polish, or presentation boards. They care where force goes.
So, do lives.
Years later, I became a structural forensic engineer, which sounds dramatic but often means standing in dusty rooms with a flashlight, asking why everyone ignored the thing the building had been saying for years. I investigated cracked beams, balcony failures, roof leaks, school hall defects, footbridge corrosion, and once a shopping center ceiling collapse caused by a sequence of small, undocumented substitutions that made me so angry I had to walk outside before writing the report. In every case, I looked for page 6, the failed test, the missing inspection, the ugly photo, the note someone called too raw. Sometimes I found it buried in an appendix. Sometimes I found the gap where it should have been. A missing page is not absence. It is evidence of pressure. That became my rule. The community hall from my first life did not collapse the same way in the second. I know because when I saw the grant application notice years later, I requested the roof truss file myself. Page 6 was missing again. This time, I knew what to do. I filed a formal document request, copied the council engineer, and wrote one sentence that still gives me satisfaction. The absence of page 6 prevents assessment of whether the roof moisture warning was resolved or removed. The original page appeared within 48 hours, misfiled, apparently. It showed severe water ingress and recommended temporary closure. The hall closed for repairs. People complained about canceled dance classes and relocated voting booths. Good. Complaints from inconvenienced people are better than eulogies from officials. On the anniversary of the collapse that never happened in this life, I stood outside the repaired hall in the rain and watched children run through the entrance, carrying music folders. Nobody thanked me because nobody knew they had been saved. That was fine. The best structural work often looks like nothing happened. I saw Mrs. Calloway once after everything, at a design education conference where she had reappeared as a consultant in portfolio refinement. That phrase almost made me laugh out loud. She approached after my panel on documenting failure in student engineering projects, older now, hair shorter, pearls replaced by a thin gold chain. Her smile was still smooth at first. "Mira Soline," she said, "your career has become very impressive. Thank you. You always had potential. You told me to tear out the page that showed it." The smile tightened. "I advised you to consider presentation. You advised me to remove a failure record your daughter later needed to explain her design." Her left hand moved toward her necklace. "That day was complicated."
No.
"Trusses are complicated. That day was simple." Her smile cracked again, smaller now but still visible, an old fracture line under fresh polish. Livia suffered after that. Livia learned to test. "You are unforgiving." "No," I said. "I am documented." She looked away first. I counted that as a load test passed. My mother eventually opened a small print, repair, and project supply shop beside the train station. Of course, she called it page 6. Our family had no talent for subtle branding after trauma. The shop sold foam board, glue, balsa strips, printer credit, report folders, page tabs, graph paper, and tiny clamps my father insisted were superior to every other clamp on earth. On the wall behind the counter, Nico painted a sign, "Don't remove the part where it broke." Students came in before project deadlines, embarrassed by messy drafts and failed prototypes, and my mother would point at the sign. "Put it in the logbook," she told them. "If it failed, it taught you something." If someone tells you to hide it, ask what they plan to steal from the gap. My father ran load tests in the back room using a bucket, old weights, and a level of enthusiasm that made parents nervous. Every time a model cracked, he said, "Good. It's speaking." Now, when I teach young designers, I begin with the ugliest page. Not the final render. Not the polished model. Not the hero photo under perfect lighting. The ugly page. The first cracked joint. The wrong measurement. The melted glue. The graph that proves your hypothesis failed. The teacher comment that stung, because it was right. The page you want to hide because it makes you look like a beginner. I tell them that beginners who document failure become engineers, while beginners who hide failure become risks with nicer fonts. I tell them that polish is not the enemy, but polish without process is varnish overwrought. I tell them that page 6 is not embarrassing. Page 6 is where the project becomes honest. The simple version is true. I was reborn. I turned in page 6. She told me to tear it out. Her smile cracked. But the simple version cannot hold the sound of my prototype snapping at 18.4 kilograms, Nico yelling bridge death, my father calling failure useful, my mother telling me to write before being dramatic, Professor Sato asking where the stress concentration was observed, Livia realizing she knew the shape but not the reason, or Mrs. Calloway's polished smile breaking exactly where page 6 refused to disappear. It cannot hold the first life girl who tore out her own proof because she thought ugliness meant weakness, or the second life girl who learned that the ugly page was load-bearing. It cannot hold the boring beauty of sealed logbooks, photograph spreads, external initials, documented failures, and a bridge that held because the first one did not. If someone ever stands beside your work, points to the page where it broke, and tells you the judges do not need to see your failure, do not reach for the tear. Reach for the seal. Photograph the page. Submit the full record. Let the crack remain visible. Let them ask what changed and why. Let the polished favorite stand beside you with a perfect final design and no answer for how it learned to survive. Then watch carefully when the smile that has been measuring your worth finally meets a page it cannot remove. That crack you hear is not your project failing. It is the sound of the truth taking load.